Hello everyone, my name is Akal and I am a somatic therapist as well as an astrological counselor. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about the services I offer, you can check out my website, which I have posted down below the video. Also down below the video is vaultoftheheavens.com, which is where you can go to get your specific nakshatras. You want to look at your moon, you want to look at your sun and your ascendant. So what we're looking at today is we're going to look at the padas, or the four subdivisions within each nakshatra. And essentially what these are is their nuance. And the other thing to keep in mind is that these nuances, although you may have been born in, let's say, pada 2, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other padas don't apply to you. Again, all these aspects and attributes apply to the entire nakshatra. However, you may have an emphasis of particular energies, hence why it's useful to find out which pada you were born into, because you'll see a little bit of nuance or an emphasis there. So today's nakshatra, and I will butcher this, Mrigashira. And that's probably the last time I'm going to say that nakshatra's name in this presentation. This nakshatra, to me, is actually quite interesting, because what we're looking at here is we're looking at what happens as the energy of Taurus merges into Gemini. So we're looking at Venus and Mercury, those energies kind of mixing together. Venus being the sign of sort of like receptivity. Receptivity, you could also say feeling. Senses would be another way to look at it. So your senses are how you, in a lot of ways, you experience your Venus, the things you feel. So another way to look at Venus is, it could be social, thinking that, again, Libra is also ruled by Venus, not just Taurus. So when we think about Venus, we can also think of social and how one interacts with the other. So, and again, this is very much about, and Venus to me is an intuitive thing too. There's a deep intuitive or instinctual aspect to what Venus is, because you experience something and then it manifests a desire to fulfill that something. And it's very much one of those, I guess, tools that we're here to sort of work with here on the material plane. It's how we kind of process our physical world. So not only are those two energies present with this nakshatra, but also this nakshatra is ruled by Mars. So I read a really interesting description of Mars recently, sort of what it describes, because one thing I always thought about Mars is like this impulsive teenager, impulsive boy teenager. So meaning extra impulsive and also possibly destructive. So Mars will kind of go slamming into things. It's not processing things in a cognitive way. So the way that Mars was described by this one astrologer was, think about the molten core of the earth and how lava percolates to the surface. It's deep in one's core. It's not necessarily something you're cognizant of. So if you can look at your body as the earth and the energy moving through your body as it's being expressed outward as Mars, or kind of like the lava. So this is unconscious flow. This is just simply, the sun or the vitality being channeled through the physical form, which is Mars. So what we got here with this nakshatra is we have this merger of the potential for a lot of energy, a lot of activity, mixed in with Venus, sensual. So we're talking about passionate activity possibly. And Mercury, which is, let's say you have a lot of energy to go towards the intellect, towards wanting to understand this or that. So the padas specifically, we have pada 1, the sun, pada 2, Mercury, pada 3, Venus, and pada 4, which is Mars, ruled by Mars. So how are these energies intertwining? So pada 1, the sun. So the sun is often, it's kind of your expression. That's the word they kept using for this first pada, was expressive. The sun, to me, is sort of what you're expressing from point A to point B, from birth to death. And again, you could say, well, how does the sun differ from Mars? Well, the sun kind of is the broader perspective. The Mars is sort of your energy from day to day. It's sort of like you're just driven towards whatever it is you're driving towards. But the energy when you wake up in the day that you have to channel outward is in a lot of ways Mars. The sun is the sort of, I almost wanted to use the word diffuse, but it's the sort of broader energy that's moving through you. It's almost like spirit or life force or prana or whatever you want to refer to it as. But it gets channeled through Mars, which, and again, is more associated with the earth or the physical body. So pada 1 is you get a little extra expressiveness. Throughout these people's life path, this energy will express itself a little more vocally, perhaps. Pada 2, you have some more Mercury energy here. So the term that I saw online was discernment. So why discernment? And I think I kind of maybe alluded to this earlier, which is Mercury being mutable. It kind of can go look at this and look at that. It is the sort of, I think about Mercury as being how we intellectually or mentally deal with the duality that we exist in. I don't want to belabor this idea of duality, but the reality is that all things in the material plane are always essentially dualistic in nature. Now, what Mercury allows us to do is to perceive this or that, and not to necessarily identify with this or that. Because what we're learning to identify is objectivity, meditation, awareness, presence, consciousness, whatever you want to refer to it as. We're not here to identify as this or that. We're not here to ruminate on these different things. I mean, we are here to do that, of course, but what we're working on cultivating, at least if you're on a spiritual path or some sort of awareness-based path, is we're working on that sort of objectivity. So people who are born in pada 2 might have a little extra objectivity. And again, that's why they use this word, discernment. Pada 3, little extra Venus. So Venus is, so again, this idea of sensual. So the term they used here was social. And I thought about that for a moment, and I'm like, why social? Why did they say social? Well, and again, I alluded to this earlier, is Libra is also ruled by Venus. And you could also maybe say, because the second two padas, or rather the second two padas, or the third pada, fourth pada, the third pada specifically right here is ruled by Gemini. So it's airy. So again, if we're thinking about how air and Venus mix, what we're looking at is mental, again, Libra as it relates to Venus. So it's the mental, and the mind is not embodied. So the mind is not in the body. The mind is actually etheric in nature. Other words, that is why this Venus, quote unquote, is social, is because it has to do with the other. So it's the mind as it applies to Venus in the desire for connection, the desire for, sensual fulfillment, etc. It's directed externally because of that air quality. The final pada, or pada 4, which my shoulder is blocking, it says Mars, or intellectual. So why intellectual? Well, again, we have a lot of Mercury going on here because Mars, in this particular case, falls within Gemini. So what we're getting here, so again, Gemini being very intellectual by nature, then you're going to add Mars to it. So, and again, we're keeping in mind that this nakshatra is ruled by Mars in the first place. So a lot of energy being applied to the intellect. So that's why it says intellectual. So it's extra intellect. So, and that sounds so sophisticated, right? I think that's all I really want to say on this. I don't want to belabor it too much, but interesting energies here. And I tend to think that overall, if I were to kind of give it a general overview, I would say we're looking at sensual, potentially fickle, related to the Mercury being in there. Again, this sort of vacillation between things, this movement between things, the intellect going back and forth between this and that. But overall, we could say this nakshatra is very much about the merger of values and knowledge. And it's the value, ultimately the valuing of knowledge. Is valuing a word? Anyway, it is now. So with all that said, hopefully you've appreciated this video and enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you later.